Hello and welcome. Last year, some 9,000 children were trafficked across India, many of them the victims of sexual abuse or ended up as slave labor. One man, Kailash Satyarthi, Nobel Prize winner, has been fighting a battle for these children and for the larger issue of trafficking. Kailash Satyarthi is launching a 11,000-kilometer rally that is starting later this month and will last a whole month and traverse 22 states to focus on the problem of child trafficking and the need for stronger laws to tackle this subject. Well, joining me now to discuss this march and what it proposes to achieve, I'm joined by Kailash Satyarthi himself. Mr. Satyarthi, thank you very much for joining us. A broad question first, what are you targeting through this march and what is the audience that you hope to reach?
When I declared the war on rape and child sexual abuse as well as trafficking, I considered that it is not an ordinary campaign or a yatra or march, and therefore I contacted every single religious leaders. I contacted Prime Minister of India and President and Vice President, as well as most of the chief ministers, central ministers, people from different walks of life. But most importantly, I am counting on youth across the nation. So they will be marching with us in different places. But I am sure that a number of judicial officers, number of politicians, parliament members, ministers, chief ministers and governors will join the march.
Well, last year about 9,000 children were trafficked. The number has gone up sharply, almost 27%. Is this because the reporting has increased or is it because the number of cases themselves are going up so sharply?
Both. I would say that, let me again underline that this Bharat Yatra is not just on the issue of trafficking, but we are covering the broader issue of violence against children and focusing on two things majorly. One is the child sexual abuses and rapes, another one is trafficking. So on one hand we wanted to create awareness across the nation, but on the other hand we wanted to see the enforcement of existing laws, as well as we are demanding a new specific and strong law against trafficking. And I am quite hopeful that such a law would be passed soon by our parliament. But definitely the reporting is a major issue. 10 years ago there was a report released by Government of India, UNICEF and others, and it was so revealing that 53% of India's children face one or other kind of sexual assault or violence, sexual violence. So the number must be in millions, in crores. But last year only 15,000 cases were registered according to NCRB data. So another big issue is that out of these 15,000, only 4% convictions were made, only 6% acquittal and 90% pendency is there, and it will take 10 years to 40 years in different states to dispose of these cases. So enforcement of the existing laws is also important, and that is possible when the people demand for it, when the victims and witnesses are protected, when people have to break their silence and speak.
A larger question here, Mr. Satyarthi, how can we all contribute to this cause? We in media, people sitting in different parts of the country, urban, rural and so on.
Well, first of all, I would say that we have to change the old notion of what we call charity begins at home. Now I think we should go for a new notion of safety begins at home. Because our children are not safe at home. Our children are not safe in schools and neighborhoods. Sometimes the close relatives and friends of the family are responsible for sexual assault and rapes of these children. So we have to be friendly with our children so that the children can speak out as friends and share their agonies and their problems, frustration which they are facing. So that should be the beginning. I would also say that people should keep an eye around them, that if some person is carrying a number of children in buses or in trains, there is a possibility that that person is a trafficker. We should also try to raise the voice on forced beggary, because everywhere we see the children are begging on the streets, but they are not doing on their own. They are not self-made entrepreneurs. They are basically forced beggars and some mafias and some organized criminal gangs are operating it. So we have to be aware of those things as well.
Well, as you know, India has a very high level of infant mortality. It has amongst the highest number of stunted children under 5, over 40 million. If you look at the two foundational concepts of education and healthcare, to what extent would you feel that we should focus on these issues to solve and address the larger problem of child trafficking, or do you not see a connection at all?
So we are all proud of being one of the youngest nations in the world, and 40% of India's population is below 18. And we proudly say that we have this demographic dividend. But India spends only 3.5% on education, healthcare, and safety protection of these children. So that is really frustrating. If we are not able to invest enough on education, healthcare, and protection, then we are not going to make the optimal use of this demographic dividend, and we are not going to create responsible citizens in the country, healthy and educated citizens as well. So if we are aspiring, of course we are all aspiring to make India a new India, but new India cannot be driven by fear, driven by malnutrition or illiteracy or bad quality education. So that should be a collective responsibility of society, government and corporate sector, as well as all sections of society, to ensure healthcare, protection and education for every child.
So your march will be traveling from the south to the north, and you've also talked about addressing issues in states like Kashmir, like how children are being used to throw stones. How do you propose to do that, and what could be the outcome?
Well, the overarching theme of Bharat Yatra is Surakshit Bachpan, Surakshit Bharat. So safe childhood, safe India. So it is not just sexual abuse or trafficking or other issues, but we are going to take up the challenge in addressing the issue of use of children for violence by the extremist and separatist forces. So that is the case in Kashmir, that is the case in number of other places, like the Maoist insurgency groups and Naxalites use children as their shields as well as weapons. They are giving the guns in their hands and training them instead of ensuring their education, giving them books and toys. And that is the case in Kashmir, where the children are being given stones, and young people are turning to be stone pelters as shields for others. So I have been requesting our Kashmiri sisters and brothers that please, please, please protect your children. You have so many other ways, and more importantly, non-violent and peaceful ways to communicate and dialogue. But don't use your children for the sake of God. Don't use your children for the sake of heaven, that the children are losing their childhood, their innocence, their smiles, and becoming angry people, violent people. That is not going to solve the purpose of your cause.
At the end of this march, if I were to ask you to roll forward a little bit, what do you feel you could have achieved, and what would be the outcomes that you would be happy with?
So this is not just personal achievement, this is achievement for the entire nation to make India safe for our children. And I am sure that at least 1 million people would be marching in 20 states and covering 11,000 kilometers distance altogether. So thousands of people, young people, would be joining every day. I'm also aiming at 1 crore Indians to take pledge against violence, and particularly against child sexual abuse and trafficking. So this is going to happen as the immediate accomplishments. But of course, we are creating a culture of working together, walking together, talking together. When a large number of faith leaders agreed to join in the march, it would be the first time perhaps in India where so many people in schools, colleges, universities and villages will see that Hindus, Muslims, Christian, Sikh, Jain, Buddha leaders coming together and speaking strongly, loudly against the menace of child sexual abuse. So in a way we are creating so many other things, but eventually we wanted to see the strict implementation of the existing laws like POCSO. We wanted to see a new law is enacted in India against trafficking.
So last question, how did you get the idea for this march, particularly the scale and the geographic breadth that we are talking about?
So this is a time-tested strategy for me. I had organized several marches. The largest ever march in the world was the Global March Against Child Labor, which I organized across 103 countries from 3 corners of the world. And we started from Africa, Latin America and Asia and reached in Geneva with a demand to United Nations and ILO that there should be an international law against child slavery, child trafficking, child prostitution and other worst forms of child labor. And we succeeded in it in 1998. I organized a similar march from Kanyakumari to Kashmir to Delhi, but that was just one big march which went on for 5.5 months. And the demand was to amend India's constitution to make education as fundamental right. And that was in 2001. 163 parliament members from different parties joined in different places, and that had emerged as a very strong caucus to demand constitutional amendment. And we succeeded. Within 5 months, India's constitution has been amended and education became fundamental right. So I have some experience marching with the young people, marching with the ordinary common people in the villages and towns and cities, because their power is the strongest moral power.
Mr. Satyarthi, thank you very much for speaking with us.
Thank you.